the program. On Monday, we will have our final presentations, and happy to share the link so you can join. The presentations are open to the public. I am Irene Tsakhreli. I'm the Director of Educational Programming here at T-Space, and together with Roxana, we have been able to coordinate this lecture series and all the other events linked to the residency program. And I will pass it on directly to our residents to introduce you, Kate, and they're on the panel leading the conversation and the Q&A. So we'll hear more from them as well. Welcome, a pleasure to have you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Hi, everyone. Kate, my name is Miranda, and I'll be introducing you today. And I am honored to introduce you. She is the Chief Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs in Contemporary Art and Fellowship at the Thomas Cole National Historic Site, which is a museum in Catskill, New York, which is very appropriate since we'll be visiting during our trip next week. Over the last 20 years, Kate has organized exhibitions and publications that bring together historic and contemporary American artists. At Thomas Cole, she's activated the Historic Artists Home and Studio by launching an award-winning exhibition program and Open House, which is a series of artist-driven installations presented within the artist's historic home, studios, and the landscape. Recently, she co-curated Emily Cole Ceramics, Flora and Contemporary Responses, and the nationally touring exhibition Women Reframe American Landscapes, showcasing Susie Barstow, who's a painter, part of the Hudson River School of Landscape, and contemporary artists such as John Quick C. Smith and Ebony G. Patterson. Kate's curated exhibitions have been featured in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, the Brooklyn Rail Hyperallergic, and has been awarded grants from the Terra Foundation, the Andy Warhol, and the National Endowment for the Arts, to name a few. Thank you, Kate, for joining us today.
Thank you all so much. I'm really honored and thrilled to be here, and just want to thank Stephen and Susan, Roxana and Irene, and all of my colleagues at T-Space and all of you for making time. I love that you're thinking outside of the box about site specificity and architecture, placemaking, and the sublime. I know that's the sublimity is the theme this year, so I'm really excited to be in conversation with you all. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my work as a curator at the Historic Artist Home and Studio of Thomas Cole, and kind of do a little virtual tour and talk about some different projects, reflect on the ways that we've responded to and activated the site, the landscape, and the campus. Before I begin, I do also want to acknowledge and thank my colleagues at the Cole site, who I work really closely with, and the artists that we've worked with. They've all allowed us to show and share their work today, and make me love the work that I do. So how many of you are familiar with Thomas Cole? I know we're on a Zoom, so it's harder, but it's always nice to know. Excellent. Looks like a couple people. Good, good, good. Well, why does Thomas Cole matter today, and to whom? It's a question that we ask ourselves at the Thomas Cole site every day, where we preserve and interpret the artist's 19th century home and studios alongside the many people who lived and labored at the site. And rather than tell audiences why we think Cole is so important, we like to engage the artist's own work and words to tell his story and allow our visitors to make up their own minds. But for me, after reading his extensive writings and journals and letters and texts like Essay on American Scenery, Lament of the Forest, and looking really closely at his artworks, one of the issues that seem to matter most to Cole continues to be really relevant today. How can we balance the built and natural worlds? And so I'll do a little background on Thomas Cole and then go into some of our initiatives. But Thomas Cole was an artist, architect, and writer, for those of you who are not familiar with him, who was working in the United States in the 19th century. And he was one of the first painters to visually represent the American landscape as unique and worth preserving. He's credited and celebrated today as inspiring a generation of artists who are now called the Hudson River School. But he was born in Bolton-le-Moor, England in 1801, and he moved with his family to the United States in 1819, and they were economic migrants who had been displaced by the Industrial Revolution. I'm just gonna go into some of these works. Thomas Cole, when he got here, found New York's Catskill Mountains to be the most sublime in the world, and I'll read you a quote from him. "I've just returned from the mountain. Dark forests, rugged rocks, towering mountains encompassed us. It was grand. It was sublime. I've found no natural scenery which has affected me so powerfully as that which I have seen in the wilderness of America." But Cole is also full of anxiety at this moment in the 1830s as he watched as the landscape was changing under the impact of swiftly encroaching industrial development. And if you can imagine, in the 1830s, Catskill didn't look like what it looks like today. There would have been over 40 tanneries, 50 iron foundries, 60 mills. They were cutting down forests to lay the railroad, and the Hudson River was a superhighway. So it's from Cole's writing that we know that he advocated for living in balance and for thoughtful development. And he took up his pen and his paintbrush to really express what he was thinking on these topics. In 1835, which was the year before Emerson would publish Nature, Cole delivered Essay on American Scenery, in which he writes about the elements of landscape, but he also talks about his distress about unchecked development. And I'll read you another quote from this address. "I cannot but express my sorrow that the beauty of such landscapes are quickly passing away. The ravages of the axe are daily increasing. The most noble scenes are made desolate, and oftentimes with a wantonness and barbarism scarcely credible in a civilized nation. The wayside is becoming shadeless, and another generation will behold spots now rife with beauty, desecrated by what is called improvement." So I'll show you, these are two of my favorite paintings of Catskill Creek. And this was one of Cole's favorite spots near his home, and he walked by this every day. Catskill Creek is a tributary of the Hudson River, and it captured his imagination. He painted this landscape over the course of 15 years more than any other. And you can see in these two works, it's the same scene, but on the left, you can see balance, mother and child. The landscape is still much greater than they are. There's a few tree trunks that foreshadow the changes that have, in fact, already started to happen when he painted this. And then on the right, if you look really closely, it's the same exact scene, but now the landscape is flattened and the trees have been cut down. There's a train that you can see in the distance and a man holding an axe. So I think it's really interesting when you go into his readings and look carefully at his work. I think a lot of people think about the Hudson River School artists as kind of promoting this nationalistic identity and manifest destiny. But if you look carefully at Cole, you realize he's really thinking about some other things very seriously. And I feel like with this work and works like The Course of Empire, he's presenting a cyclical series of landscapes transformed by human interventions. And we know people have always been a part of and intervening within the landscape. But I think Cole was really thinking about industry and in this series, he moves from this kind of natural world to the final work, which is called Desolation. And it shows the rise and fall of human civilization as if almost like a cautionary tale. Has anyone been to see this? It's at the New York Historical Society. It's pretty epic and feels really relevant today. But again, I just find this work so relevant. Can we balance development with preservation? Can we create harmony and reciprocity among nature and culture? Um, and I feel like right now in this moment, these questions are as important as they were in Cole's time, because what is happening to the land is also happening to us. We're a part of that. So today at the Thomas Cole site, where I know you guys are going to be visiting in another week or two, you'll get a sneak peek or a tour from me here. But we continue to be inspired by the artist and his vision and the place that he loved and worked. And when you come to the site, you'll be able to see his works, his original paintings, his materials, hear his own words, and read letters between Cole and his patrons. We also offer a broad range of programs in education and exhibition, publications, and all kinds of special events. But I'm going to give you a sneak peek into the house. Not only was Cole an amazing painter and writer, but he was also an architect. And his design for the Ohio State Capitol is the one that they used. And it was only recently that we discovered, after marrying Mariah Bartow in 1836 and moving into the house, he redecorated all of the interiors. He painted these periwinkle colors and different wall colors. And in fact, after doing really careful paint analysis, we discovered that Cole had painted directly on the walls as well. And so here you can see on the upper right these friezes that he painted in the east and west parlor as a way to show his own artwork in the best light. So here you can see this is the west parlor. And here's the old studio where he worked from 1838 to 46. Make sure to go and see this. It has his original easels and stuff. And here's the new studio. This is the building that Thomas designed and built in 1846 when he was teaching a young Frederick church and didn't have enough room in the old studio. The building was actually leveled in the 1970s, but through drawings from Cole and sketches from other artists who had come to visit, we were able to reconstruct it in 2016. And we reconstructed it as his studio, but also as a climate-controlled museum gallery so that we could bring Cole's own original artworks and other artworks back to the site for exhibitions. And through it all, we continue to feature our collections to help tell the story. And we work really closely with artists and scholars, thinkers, and our Cole Fellows who come and do research with us across the year. But I'm going to get to some of our curatorial initiatives now. In Cole's time, people came from all over to see the latest in contemporary landscape art. And as such, we continue to work directly with contemporary artists, not only to activate the legacy of the site as a place where art has long been made, but also because, like Cole, we really believe in the power of art and ideas. And so this happens in part, as I mentioned, through thematic exhibitions that bring together 19th century and contemporary artists over themes, and then open house, contemporary art and conversation with Cole, which is a series we launched in 2015, where we invite contemporary artists to create unique site-responsive installations within and in conversation with the historic artist's home, the studios, and the landscape. Operating from the concept that all art is contemporary to our own moment, the program looks to activate these conversations between artists across centuries and is collaborative by nature. On this slide, you can see an installation from an exhibition we did called Spectrum, honoring Cole's diagram of contrasts or color wheel. And this is an installation by Anne Lindbergh and then another one by Julianne Swartz. But the projects that we have done have ranged from those that literally reference Cole's iconic works to those that expand on themes Cole wrestled with in his own work and writing, spanning landscape and history to the cycles of life, the sublime, environmental preservation. And when we work with artists, when we begin a project, I always like to ask, what can you do here in this really unique context that you can't do anywhere else? And what would be meaningful to your own practice here in this space? I feel like all spaces, all buildings, all exhibitions have a context. Even a white cube has a context. So we work very closely with the artists, not only to select the work, but to cite either they choose existing artworks and create new site responsive installations with them, or sometimes they're so inspired they create new work. But all of it is intentionally cited in conversation with and within the historic interiors and collections. Since we've launched the program, we've worked with over 50 contemporary artists. And so I'm going to give you a little like a highlights tour of some of our projects. This is one of my favorite projects was with the artist Shi Guari, Absence Presence. And this is Catskill Creek. For this exhibition, Shi Guari retraced the footsteps of Thomas Cole and created new giant camera obscura photographs of the landscapes that Cole painted over 180 years ago. The resulting photographs presented in the 19th century's artist's home offered completely new ways to see the landscape and a cross-cultural exchange between American art histories and much older landscape traditions that began in China in the 11th century Song dynasty. And these are, Guari has been studying these. So he talked about how, showing with Thomas Cole, he felt like they were contemporaries. The 180 years between them felt so small compared to this vast history of the land and the art that inspired his work. He turned Thomas Cole's study into a camera obscura and made this work. But it was really, really beautiful because, although the artists were working in different centuries, they were both confronting the impact of rapid development and loss from a place of reverence for cycles and time and the natural world, and definitely both thinking about the sublimity of it all. We also got to work through Open House on a project with Kiki Smith. I imagine some of you are familiar with her work. She's really an amazing artist with a visionary approach to art and history. Living a mile and over 100 years apart, we discovered in our conversations with Kiki that they had both made work focused on Catskill Creek, that run, the estuary of the Hudson that runs near their homes. And so for this installation with Kiki, she filled the artist's family home with, among other things, saplings and crystals and this like wild kingdom of animals, deer, bats, owls, wolves, and doves, many of which can be spotted in the Catskill landscape or inside a Thomas Cole painting. Here's some of the install views of this project. So these are her sculptures with Cole's work. And I guess, if Cole's landscapes are epic and sweeping, Kiki's works and interventions allowed us to focus more on the iconic elements of what makes up a landscape and how it's all interconnected. We also I'll tell you about this major touring exhibition that we launched in partnership with Olana and Crystal Bridges, Cross-Pollination, Heed Cool Church in Our Contemporary Moment, was a project that included over 85 artists, or 85 works by 25 artists. And we developed cross-pollination in honor of Cole and Church to explore pollination in nature and ecology, as well as thinking about pollination as a metaphor for the interplay between art and science and relationships among artists across generations. So it really starts with Heed, Cole, and Church in the 19th century, who all engaged close observation of the natural world, traveled, sketched, and collected as part of their creative process. Here's some of their collections, which were like so fascinating. There's eggs and minerals and herbariums, and extended across generations to Emily Cole and Isabel Charlotte or Downey Church, who were their daughters, to contemporary artists who are working today and continue to find inspiration in art and science. And the artists that we selected for the contemporary portion are really calling upon different practices and mediums, but all focusing on critical issues around climate change, biodiversity, habitat loss, and how to balance the built and natural world. This is on this slide is work by Paula Hayes, who created living landscapes and miniature ecosystems in hand-blown terrariums. And she also constructed this, in the center, you can see this habitat for birds. And Mark Dion and Dana Sherwood created an interactive public artwork that they called the Pollinator Pavilion, which was made to provide a feast for pollinators. But human visitors also got an opportunity to go into it and observe and encounter the pollinators up close. This is a work by Jeff Whetstone installed in Cole's old studio. We showed work by Jeffrey Gibson in a studio visit with him. We found out that he had made a work riffing on Heed's journey to go and see these hummingbirds and questioning who has access to nature. And we also worked with Lisa Sanditz and Emily Sarter, who made this incredible work, The Thrilling Tales and Startling Adventures, An Unofficial Guide to Pollinators, which was a self-guided map of pollinators, pollen makers, and habitats local to the environs of the Upper Hudson Valley, where we are sited. And in 2023, we launched a touring exhibition, Women Reframe American Landscape, Susie Barstow and Her Circle, Contemporary Practices, which I co-curated with two amazing, brilliant curators, Nancy Siegel and Amanda Malmstrom. And this project illuminated the artistic contributions and perspectives of women. It was a two-part exhibition. And it included the first retrospective of the 19th century artist Susie Barstow. It was, we found out, the first solo exhibition of any 19th century woman landscape painter in the United States. So that was felt really important. But it also, the exhibition also included site responsive installations and large scale works by 13 internationally known contemporary artists who were thinking about land and landscape. And we wanted to engage multi-generational perspectives and different practices to recenter women in the history of American landscape art, and also to complicate and expand how we might be thinking about land and landscape today. And this was very relevant or felt immediate at the Thomas Cole site, right? Because Thomas Cole is celebrated and often called the father of American landscape. And art history books show us this kind of fraternity of male artists in the Hudson River School, Albert Bierstadt, Frederick Church, Asher B. Durand, But we know that women have always been making and exhibiting landscapes alongside the male counterparts, and the full names of over 50 women associated with the Hudson River School have been identified. And so we really wanted to address that gap historically with this big exhibition of Susie Barstow's work and think critically about perspectives around land and landscape today. So here's Teresita Fernandez's installation um, in the 1815 main house. And Teresita was one of the first artists that we worked with who was asking really important questions. Who gets to define American landscape? What is American art? What happens when you shift from landscape to land? Landscape's a construction, a single point perspective with a horizon line and a gilded frame. But land, when you think about land, it has economic, political, cultural, ecological, personal, spiritual realities. And so for this exhibition, Teresita created this room size installation called Small American Fires. And it includes 12 ink and pencil works on wood that depict fire. Lake Thomas, who painted the friezes in the rooms, you can see some of them right here. Teresita drew directly on the walls to connect and create this giant landscape. And she intentionally drew using charcoal because charcoal is pieces of land itself forged through fire. And she talked a lot about fire for the artist and in ecological systems represents destruction, but also creation. And she was thinking about how fire signals the ongoing violence of climate crisis and legacies of displacement and enslavement. But equally, fire illuminates a generative history of sophisticated and deliberate slash and burn agricultural practices that have been used by indigenous people across the hemisphere for thousands of years, and specifically to foster sustainable land relationships. So in this space, on these same walls that Cole painted in the 1800s, Teresita's honoring it, but also challenging conventional American landscape, rejecting this myth of wilderness and making visible these layers of all the human connections. And in this project, we were so honored and thrilled to work with the iconic feminist collective, the Guerrilla Girls, and they created this new work for the exhibition, Reality Check, the Hudson River School. And I'll just read you their words. It wasn't a school, it was a club of white males who painted the American landscape, hung out together, and sold their work to many of the same collectors. Hudson River School paintings depicted a wilderness tamed by white settlers when in fact the land had been inhabited, cultivated, and protected for millennia by indigenous nations. And Ebony G. Patterson in the west parlor of the 1815 main house. We presented this work by Ebony G. Patterson called The Wailing Ushers Us Home, and There is a Bellying on the Land. And this work it's really so intricate and beautiful, this tapestry, but the artist really is asking us to look below the surface to what is below the land and what it holds, again, to give some visibility to histories of violence that have taken place on the land here. And she talks about it as a garden, and I'll read a quote from the artist. She thinks of it as a metaphor for death, burial, and renewal, but also a space for love and care, and that the garden is a site of possibility and a chance to shift. We presented work by Wendy Redstar critiquing conventions of conventional landscape painting. This is a series called Four Seasons, and was really just a humorous reminder that all landscapes are constructed. Anna Plessett created this work called American Paradise, second edition. And this sculpture responds specifically to the iconic canon-defining Hudson River School exhibition, American Paradise, that was organized by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1987. And the exhibition and the book included 84 works by 25 male artists and not a single work by any of the women who were working in the 19th century. So, as an act of revision, Anna created the second edition, placing a work by Susie Barstow as the frontispiece, quite literally inserting women back into the history books. She also made this work honoring Sarah Cole, who was an artist and painter working in the 19th century, also Thomas Cole's sister. And we included 5 works by Jean Quick to See Smith. This is called Unhinged Map, and it's hanging over Thomas Cole's drafting desk. Riffing on Christopher Columbus's navigational errors, Jean upturns the map of the Americas to call into question how land is mapped, who owns the land, and who has the power to name it. We also showed these works, which the titles kind of say it all: She, Her, Hers, America, Stolen, $. And these were all installed in the sitting room where, we think Cole wrote things like Essay on American Scenery and was thinking really deeply about the politics of his moment. This is a work by Tanya Marcuse, Woven, number 33. Shifting from this single point perspective and horizon line that's historically defined a landscape in art terms, Tanya literally turned the view to the ground, and she composes these landscapes or tapestries with foraged flora and fauna that she finds near her Hudson Valley home. I'll give you a close-up. And, I found it so interesting because, like Cole, she's responding to the place she calls home and looking at the life within. But the work, by taking away this horizon line, it reminds us that we don't actually live in a landscape. We live in and are part of an ecosystem. This work is amazing to see in person because it's just so intricate. We included incredible work by Kay Walking Stick in this project. Saya Wolfach wanted to create this work called Birthing a New Sky. And she talks about it as a hybrid future imagined world where women share genetic material with plants. They coexist with, embody, and become a part of the land. And she, we worked closely with her, and she installed this work next to things from our collection, including Thomas Cole's own collection of herbarium, these plants that you can see here, and then his work Landscape with Clouds, thinking about skies. And the artist Jean Shin, incredible artist, created this work Displaced, where she reused art shipping crates that we had used to transport Thomas Cole's own artwork. And then Jean filled the crates with soil that was displaced from the Cole site today, along with discarded scraps from her own artwork. And Shin really wanted to call attention to both her and Thomas Cole's shared concerns about ecological damage by looking at the pollution and the waste that's found in soil today, but also I think meaningfully to question our own carbon footprint resulting from the creation of art and exhibitions and the shipping that goes into all of it. I don't know if you're familiar with the amazing artist Cecilia Vicuña, but this was one of my favorite installations. We installed her video Con Con outside. And this is a documentary poem, or she calls it a documentary poem. And she addresses how Concon, where she's from, was impacted when an oil refinery was built atop of this place that has an ancient burial ground and was a nature preserve. We also showed, created an installation in Cole's old studio by Marie Lorenz, which includes these videos of her journeys into the urban waterways in New York City and Catskill Creek, as well as floor-to-ceiling sculpture casted from detritus and things found in the landscape. But it's interesting because instead of the Arcadian world that Cole dreamed of and painted, Lorenz, with this work, really makes visible the land today as something that's full of natural and synthetic materials, um, toxins, as well as new organic life, all coexisting and sharing this space. And then Mary Mattingly created an ecotopian library that reflected the specific history and ecology of the Thomas Cole site and the Hudson River. So she had on the shelves like soil samples and artwork by Emily Cole and writing by Thomas, as well as a whole library of really incredible books and thinking about our relationship with the environment today. And the exhibition toured to the New Britain Museum of American Art and the Woodson Museum in Wisconsin. And just going to wrap up some of this, but show you a few more slides. One of our recent projects was with Alan Michelson, called Prophetstown, and Alan's a Mohawk member of the Six Nations of the Grand River, and he created this installation across Thomas Cole's home and in the landscape that called for sustained looking from multiple vantage points and mirroring Michelson's interest in challenging singular or fixed narratives around history. He is a Mohawk citizen of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is the oldest living democracy in the Western Hemisphere, and was really meaningful to work with him because he really transformed the way that I understand and see the history of the United States landscape. He had such a deep connection to place, just like Thomas Cole, who cared about these topics too. So it included this room-size installation of Prophetstown, which was challenging American stereotypes with dioramas and the log cabin. And then this piece called Hannah de Gaius, Town Destroyer, which spoke to George Washington's involvement in the Sullivan campaign that systematically wiped out over 60 Haudenosaunee villages. So I feel like presenting new exhibitions and ideas and programs and contemporary artists and installations at the historic home and studio of the artist allows us to activate the legacy of the site as a place where artists have always worked. It allows us to celebrate, but also contextualize the ongoing relevance of the artists who lived and worked here, and affords a unique opportunity for artists to create really new site responsive installations. And finally, it really opens a space for our own audiences and our publics to hopefully engage in a meaningful way with art and history, the natural world, and with issues that matter right now, today. And I know you guys are coming to the Cole site soon, so I'm excited for you to see our amazing new Cole Center, which is the latest building on our campus. It's extraordinary. It's based on Thomas Cole's original new studio, but it was designed with Stephen Chadley. And then our current exhibition, which you'll see, Emily Cole Ceramics Flora and Contemporary Responses. And I'll just show you a couple pictures before I close. But, we have long celebrated, and I've just talked so much about Thomas Cole and honoring his vision. But with this current exhibition, we're expanding our own narrative and history at the site by centering Emily Cole. And Emily was a lifelong artist and resident of the historic property. She was a painter of dynamic flowers on porcelain and paper. And her body of work depicts the flora that was growing right outside her door in her Hudson Valley home. The exhibition is the largest presentation of Emily Cole's work since the 19th century and celebrates the significance of her work from both historic and contemporary perspectives. And we found it only fitting on this occasion because we've been engaging artists with Thomas's work to engage 8 internationally celebrated artists in a call and response with Emily's works and thinking about ceramics and flora. So with this project, we really hope to spark generative conversations about Emily's work, but also the enduring importance of ceramics and flora and the natural world today. This install view is the new studio, which, as I've said, Thomas Cole designed and worked in. But we found out that after Thomas Cole passed away, it was Emily Cole's studio, and she had a kiln and she had exhibitions and painted china and work in here. So we created this exhibition in here. And then we invited the artist Francesca Di Matteo to create this site responsive installation in the studio and paint directly on the walls. You'll also see work by Anne Agee, Valerie Hegarty, Jacqueline Bishop, Michelle Sound, and Courtney Leonard. So thank you all for coming on this tour with me. And I'm excited to have a conversation with you all and answer any questions or talk with you more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate, for giving us this travel through time. It's very interesting to see the juxtapositions of old and new thinking coexisting in this place. Which is full of thought, very energizing to see it. I was intrigued very much by a slide you showed earlier on of two paintings side by side by the creek, which showed the transformation of the landscape and how the sublime was, in a way, a definition. The definition of the sublime is maybe accommodating more transformation than I originally thought. When thinking of the sublime as a pure, untouched landscape, which in fact it was not. So it would be great if you can elaborate a little bit more on that and how the sublime can still be read, maybe in a constantly evolving scene.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And, I was looking at what, the theme of your residency and thinking about sublimity. And I think, for Cole, and when I think, like, what is the sublime? All I have to do is go up to the top of Catterskill Falls and stand, like, right where the falls are rushing off, and I can't see what's on the other side. There's just this drop. And so when I think of the sublime, I think about this kind of awesome, incredible, staggering beauty that is also terrifying. So that's, I think the definition that Thomas Cole is thinking about. And he's, you know, um, art historically, he's thinking about, he's combining the sublime a la Salvatore Rosa, who's, making these works that are kind of devastatingly terrifying, with like things like the pastoral by people like Claude Lorraine. So bringing together beauty and this awesome power of the natural world. And I think in Cole's mind, with things like Course of Empire, the natural world was so much more powerful than anything people could do to displace it, right? Um, but I, you also talked about, let me go back to, I think today, when a lot of the artists that we work with who are thinking about the sublime, like artists like Lisa Sanditz and Mark Swanson, who we've done projects with, today the sublime might be like how incredible, you know, uh, how incredible it is that we can import and ship goods all over the world. Like we can have things here from China, but also like the terror of what it's doing to the natural environment. So like the new sublime might be this kind of ecological disaster of climate crisis, and realizing what wealth and prosperity we have and the ability for global travel, but also the dire consequence of that footprint and what it's doing to the health of the environment. And I know, when we did an exhibition with Mark Swanson, it was great. He was looking at, he's like, Thomas Cole would be so thrilled if he were alive today to see how the Catskill landscape has been preserved. But then when we told him about the statistics of climate change, he would be devastated. So I think a lot of artists are thinking about the new sublime as this, as climate crisis, trying to protect and save something that we're all a part of and rely on, but something that's being threatened, and that we're losing. Did I answer the question?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much, Kate. Yes.
Hi, Kate. I guess I don't know if this is really a question, more so a comment. But what you just talked about also made me think about how the sublime might be the conversations that are kind of lost in translation between either cultures or time periods. I know like a lot of native cultures, like they have specific words or sounds that are like really hard to translate into like English. Um, and I guess like even with art, if that somehow captures this like different level of translation that's not necessarily verbal. Yeah, I don't know if you have any reflections on that, but
No, I think that's like I love what you're saying. And I think that, it's like I can talk about all of these art projects, but like experiencing the artwork itself and seeing it, I think is also another experience. And so um, the artworks themselves have this work. But we did work with this artist, Rachel Berwick, who's really interesting, but she just thinking about languages and cultures, for the cross-pollination exhibition, she created this work about hummingbirds that was looking at the Aztecan codex and looking at different ways that hummingbirds were seen in Aztecan histories and as fallen warriors. So I don't know that this answers your question, but one thing I can say is that like with all of our exhibitions, one of the things we really like to do is to show these different perspectives and different understandings for what something can symbolize or mean, and offer new ways to think about our relationships and very specific things. The artist Jiha Moon has this incredible installation at the Coal Site now that you'll see when you come to visit. But she, like Emily, paints and creates china, but she uses like flora and different references. But like she uses peaches, for instance, and the peaches in the work is meant to. She writes about it and talks about it as being, peaches are can be seen as this derogatory symbol of women's chests. Peaches, she's a artist from Korea who's been living in Georgia for 20 years. And so peaches also represent Georgia, the peach state. But in Korea, peaches represent our good luck, and in mythology, protect you. So I think this idea of, within the space of an exhibition, you can have really interesting conversations and make visible these different perspectives and engage audiences with different ways of seeing and knowing and maybe understanding things. And I think that is something at the heart of what we hope to do with some of these projects. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it definitely does. Like, it just made me reflect on like how the sublime is like ultimately like how, or there's like a lack of understanding in a way, but at the same time, there's like multiple perceptions that aren't necessarily wrong. So I think that fits the question.
right. I mean, I guess I'm really interested that you all have sublimity as a theme for your residency. And if you all want, if anyone wants to share how you're thinking about the word sublime, I would find that so meaningful too in my own thinking about it. So, but it is, yeah, I mean, there's been books and so many artists and thinkers thinking about it. But what is it in architecture and spaces and for you now? I would love to know.
Yeah, I'd like to share some of my thoughts on that I've been having lately as I'm like, we're kind of wrapping up our projects. So we're like, putting together all of our concepts and thinking more deeply about the definition of the sublime. And I think um, at first, when I saw like Thomas Cole's paintings, and I think I sort of, paintings like this were part of our presentation. So I had an understanding of like bigness and it was about scale. And I think that through the course of designing like a human scale structure, I've realized that architecture in relation to sublime is not just about framing bigness, because we can't do that. Like architecture inherently, it happens, like the things we build happen at the scale of our bodies. And so the question becomes, how do you experience the sublime even at a small scale? And I think that what your artwork and the artwork here and the curation you've done kind of makes me understand is that we don't just experience the sublime physically by like seeing a big horizon. We also, as you're saying, in maybe the current day, how do we remember the sublime? Through like a rock or through a tree or something really small. Um, and I think another thought that I've been having that I also think your work in curation is doing is like upsetting timescales a bit, like upsetting the Gregorian calendar, um, and using or introducing like freeing landscape from its temporal captivity and you know introducing a new like scale of time. And I guess it's something that like not only Thomas Cole's paintings have shown, but all of the other artists that you've introduced are kind of upsetting. Like you can't even put a date on some of the things because to do so in Gregorian years would be ironic, because our calendar is very recent. So that's just something that I'm thinking about that I guess is relevant as well. Um, yeah, that was just a lot of thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. And I think, thank you for saying all that. And I do feel like the relationship to our body and the scale of the body is so important too. I'll be interested to know what you all think of Thomas Cole's new studio when you visit and when you go in, because it's like at once, like there's this really high ceiling, but it's also this very intimate, it's not a small space, but comparatively, it's not epic and grand. There's something intimate to it. Um, but that's also tied into this idea of like it's the perfect studio for someone like Thomas Cole who's thinking about these sublime, vast, epic landscapes, and yet there's something very intimate and to human scale about it in the building itself.
I guess I can also share my thoughts on the sublime and maybe go into a comment that I think is really exciting about your curatorial work. So the way that my project has progressed began very simply with the etymology of the word and thinking about sub being under and women being a threshold. So it's more of a way of like how to move above and below a landscape and how to approach a landscape. And so this week, as Shrey said, we're wrapping up, and I'm really grappling with this idea of, can architecture orchestrate the sublime? Is that something that can kind of be pre-planned to experience? And maybe others' accounts of the sublime are a little untrustworthy, or I'm just having my my doubts on this like kind of like built environment to experience the sublime. When you see painters like Thomas Cole kind of, or we've heard lectures also this week of like sketching in the moment and like life being this creative act, and therefore we're doing a lot of thinking and planning for a sublime moment. And I don't know if I believe that anymore. um but I love all of the work that you've done with the Thomas Cole House. It's super exciting to see um, the time gap be closed between the historic painters and then contemporary artists, where, being based in Kansas City, there is the Thomas Hart Benton home. And he was an artist that made these massive, colossive murals, but the home is frozen in time. You go there and his paintbrushes are exactly as they were when he left them. And so there's kind of it's something that you visit once but you don't ever come back to. And I love that your curatorial work is like continually bringing people back to this site and to this home and to this whole experience, where it continues on in its legacy. And so I don't know if there's like a thought on like regionalism or something there also, but it is quite exciting.
Oh, thank you so much. That means the world to me. Thank you. I really love hearing about how you all are thinking about the sublime and these different ways of engaging it in space and time, because so and if anyone else wants to talk more about it, I don't know.
I would like to share a reflection. When you said that we don't live in a landscape, we live in an ecosystem. So I think that I found that statement very powerful. I think it also reframes our understanding of seeing the landscape as a whole to seeing it as like a parts of something smaller, which kind of accumulates our experience of the whole landscape. So I think the way you mentioned, maybe that's the new Sublime. So I really found that powerful and also maybe a way forward. So, and also I think it makes the Sublime an inconceivable concept, from an inconceivable concept to something that's more contextual and something that's more, grounded, I would say.
No, thank you. I feel like thank you so much. And I also feel like realizing that we're like a part of this a living ecosystem is the only way forward. And like Cole wasn't, I think Cole was aware of it, but the term ecology hadn't even, the term ecology, at least in Anglo Euro Western thinking, didn't come out until like I think 1863 or something. So Cole died in 1848, but I think older cultures and people have always been aware and honoring those connections, and especially right now, like it feels so critical to be thinking that way.
Thank you for your talk, Kate. I think I'm deeply inspired by your discussion on coal, and for me, I think my inspiration for Sublime directly came from sort of Ruskin and also Emerson's idea of the American geological sublime. I remember reading on Jackson Turner's article on the significance of frontier of American landscape, where the the sublime is sort of enacted by the advancement of literally the technology of train line, right? And there's this friction between the technological sublime caused by the train versus the sort of pastoral landscape that we've seen before, the arrival of technology. Do you have any sort of like comments on this idea of frontier in Sublime? Because I feel like Cole's painting is also about, frontier, right? It's always on the shoulder of a mountain, discovering the other side of some sort of landscape.
Well, that's really interesting. And do you mean like the frontier or like on the forefront, or do you mean like in the term of like American frontiers, that kind of?
It's sort of like the frontier that's being advanced by the discovery, right? The
Right.
technological discovery, right? There's always a major direction pointing west, right?
Mhm.
From the east to west. That kind of, I guess, advancement of frontier. Um,
Right. Well, it's so interesting because one of the leading Cole scholars who I respect so much, Alan Wallach, says Cole was just an anti-modernist, and he was, concerned about all of this new technology and stuff. But I think Cole literally, he grew up in Bolton Lemoore, and he saw, in the town that he lived in, there were boats on the canal that were transporting like raw coal and iron, and he saw what happened. And so when he got to the United States, he had this stereotypic idea that the development wouldn't be so intense, but it was already here. There was already, the forests were being cut down, the tanneries. Like when you look out into the Catskill Mountains, there were over 40 tanneries. And so, and kind of like fracking, the tanners would go strip all the bark from the hemlock trees, make tan the hides, and then move on. And then the trees would die. And so Cole has works like Lake with Dead Trees, which is like looking at how industry is literally, changing that landscape. And I think that is sublime. I think Cole thought that the American landscape was sublime in its like epic quality, but I think also today artists, and maybe I'm repeating myself, but artists are thinking about how this destruction of the land is also sublime, because if you think of the sublime as being awesome and staggeringly beautiful, but also terrifying. And but I don't want to get off track to this question. I do think that Cole was asking, in things like Yesterday American Scenery, he was, offering an opportunity to say, well, I know we have to build, he wrote this in one of his lectures, I know we have to build houses and I know we have to, travel, but do we have to do so at the expense of 100-year-old forest? Do we have to cut all the trees down for a quick gain? And so this idea of balancing it. And I think a lot of people, again, say, oh, the Hudson River School painters were promoting national identity and manifest destiny and westward expansion. But I think Cole was actually saying something very different. He was saying, let's, I know we have to build houses, but can we do so in a way that doesn't destroy 100-year-old forest? Can we do it in a way that is, the word sustainable didn't exist at the time. I don't think they were, and even environmentalists. So we call Cole, I think I interpret him as a proto-environmentalist because he's thinking about it. But I don't know. I think today, like um, AI technology, what is the equivalent of like this, something that, modern transportation and all of trade is so great and has created economies and jobs and made our lives possible as they are today. But like, at what cost? At what cost do they come to us? And I feel like today we are still in like a really critical place thinking about industry and um, pollution, but also like things like AI and all of these things. I don't know. I mean, what do you all think? But I guess with new things, it's I don't know. There's so many, it's complicated and there's so many sides to it. I don't know if I answered your question, Alex, but I appreciated what you were speaking to. I would be excited to see your projects when I know you all are presenting about them.
Yes, Kate. Uh, First of all, I mean, I think what your statement earlier was a great way to conclude the presentation, and the way you've opened up the understanding about sublimity is enormously helpful. Even though I did have one more question about light, how sublimity in light or reflections and the color palette. The Thomas Cole introduced specifically. If you wanted to add a few thoughts or comments on the use of color and the depiction of light in response to in conjunction with the idea of sublimity. But we will definitely put together the works and find a way to continue this conversation when we meet in person. That I think that's a great idea, and you're more than welcome to join the final presentations as well. They're on Monday at 11 o'clock via Zoom. So we'll follow up with an invite if you're available. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this and your generosity in welcoming the residents and their thoughts into your work.
Oh, thank you so much. This has really been such a pleasure, and I'm excited to learn more about what you all are doing, and I want to join the presentation. So I will, when you come to visit, you will see Thomas Cole has this incredible diagram of contrast, or we call it the color wheel, but he was obsessed with color. And Anne Lindbergh, one of the artists that whose work I showed you in one of the install shots earlier, has done these incredible installations thinking about color and light and how it changes. And we had included her work in an exhibition that we did called Spectrum, which was looking at Cole's fascination with color. And I don't know, maybe Anne could speak better about how it connects to the sublime. But I can tell you that Thomas was fascinated with color in his journals. He wrote about wanting to design a musical instrument that would play the sound of color. And then there were all these charts that he made with like colors and linking them to emotions, and then colors and linking them to musical notes. And for a long time, people said, oh, he was synesthetic, right? But I talked with different scholars around this exhibition, and they said, well, no, he was probably just trying to reconcile these different theories about color. Newton's theory of the color spectrum and it being science, and then Goethe's theory about color, that colors are completely emotional. And so like bringing the emotional and the science together but it's beautiful because he writes about these analogies between colors and emotions and colors and sounds and colors and music. And specifically, the diagram of contrast isn't about necessarily just colors, but how colors change in light and darkness. And he wrote about what it means to plant an orange flower next to a blue flower and things like that. So there's a lot to explore there, and it speaks to kind of his interdisciplinary engagement with like music and geology and all of that. Oh, look, Anne is here. Anne, if you want to speak to this.
I'm using my phone. I apologize. So
Hi.
I think if it's okay with you, I will just speak. Can everyone hear me? No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Kate, for suggesting that I offer something. Yeah, the Sublime, the project that I was graciously asked to do at the Cole site was really invigorating. The exhibition was about color from the point of view of contemporary artists in the context of Cole's work. And I just want to say as an anecdote that I moved to the Hudson Valley from the Midwest. And as you cross the sort of into the Chesapeake Bay area, moving across the country or into sort of the eastern seaboard, the quality of color in the sky does dramatically change. In the Midwest, it sort of feels very much over your head and crystalline. And when I found myself in the Hudson Valley, I really said to myself, boy, Cole really was showing us something that does exist. The light in this region seems to sort of come from the side, and it has an amber quality. And Kate helped me connect some dots about the climate and the ecosystem of the Hudson River and the relative proximity to the ocean and so on, the particulate in the sky that creates that sort of amber feeling, which Cole so beautifully rendered. But what was so great about the site that Kate encouraged me to work within were those periwinkle walls at the top of the stair on the second floor in the sort of spaces between some of the occupied spaces. I presented yellow thread in front of the window to act almost like a lens to the changing light with those periwinkle walls. So I guess you could say that to me, the sublime is, it's a kind of electricity. It's emotional electricity. It's physical electricity that you feel in your body when you are witnessing something that you're either looking at or hearing or feeling that is sublime. So that complementary color condition, which Kate just referred to, was something that I was able to sort of visualize or present a version of. Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to say something.
That's so beautiful, Anne. Oh my gosh. Emotional electricity. That's it. I mean, that's it too, right? That's it. Mm.
That's perfect indeed, and a great way to conclude this presentation, which also marks the end of the 2025 lecture series. More soon. Thank you very much, everyone, for this great talk, and thank you very much to all the supporters who make this residency program possible. We would not be able to be here and have this conversation at all without them. So thank you again, and we look forward to having you next week during the presentations. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.